The workshop always hits you first with the smell, ozone, hot insulation, and that sharp, coppery tang of scorched metal that never quite left your clothes no matter how many cycles. You ran them through the ship's cleaners. 3 years aboard the Valiant Dawn, and I'd come to associate that scent with everything I'd trusted. Working systems, repaired hull plates, power lines humming the way they should. It was the perfume of problems becoming solutions. I was elbow deep in one of those problems when the doorway darkened. At first, I thought a crate bot had rolled in front of the lights. Then the shadow shifted, and the deck plates gave a soft, protesting groan under a weight they hadn't been designed for. The figure in the entrance wasn't a crate bot. She filled the frame like a myth. 8 feet of Krillix warrior broad-shouldered, plated in bio-armor that looked grown rather than forged, and painted in faintly pulsing lines of bioluminescent blue that marked noble lineage. Her skin was azure, almost metallic under the workshop lamps, and her presence turned my cluttered little corner of the ship into something smaller, like a toolbox under a mountain. Thompson. Her voice rived through her translator as a deep, rolling rumble, the words shaped by a machine that couldn't quite soften the thunder. I require your assistance. I slid out from under the open power coupling, metal dust on my cheek, and wiped my hands on a rag that had long ago surrendered any hope of being clean. Commander Celara, I said, because I'd learned Krillix titles mattered. You don't usually come down to my hole in the wall unless something's on fire. Her gaze didn't flicker. Krillix eyes were luminous in a way human eyes weren't, like light had been trapped behind them and couldn't find a way out. I'd seen those eyes in briefings, in the corridor, on the tactical screens when she stood like a living fortress on the bridge. I'd never seen them this close, and I'd never seen the uncertainty sitting behind them like a second shadow. She stepped forward. The workshop lights caught the jagged tear across her chest armor. I felt my stomach tighten. The armor was thick-layered composite plating over a biosynthetic mesh that interfaced with her nervous system. It was the kind of thing other species built when their whole culture was shaped around being unbreakable. But it had been broken. A long, ragged gash cut through the reinforced surface, edges blackened and crystalline, 3 layers deep at least, maybe more. The damage wasn't cosmetic. It was a near miss. That looks bad, I said quietly, because loudness felt wrong in the presence of something that had almost died. What hit you? Scorven plasma lance. The translator rendered the harsh consonants cleanly. The battle at Iron 7. Iron 7. I'd watched the aftermath reports. Wrecked moons, scattered debris fields, ships reduced to glittering dust. The Scorven didn't fight like the Krillix or the humans. They fought like lightning fast, brutal, and indifferent to collateral damage. Celara took another step, and I caught a glimpse beneath the torn plating, frayed fibers thin, wet-looking, strands that pulsed faintly with her bioluminescence hung exposed like nerves. I forced myself not to flinch. The ship's fabricators cannot replicate the bonding technique. She said, they claim only a human engineer would understand the intuition required. I snorted, but without humor. I'd heard variations of that sentence since humanity joined the galactic community. Other species had manuals. We had improvisation. The galaxy called it adaptive ingenuity, like it was some exotic gene, rather than the byproduct of being born on a planet that tried to kill you. In 100 creative ways, intuition, I echoed, then set the rag aside and motioned to the reinforced examination table in the center of my bay. I'd modified it for larger clients' cargo handlers with exosuits, a Navari diplomat with a delicate pressure frame, one unfortunate merchant who'd shown up with a knee joint full of sand from ashore. Leave incident. All right, Commander. Let me see what we're dealing with. Selara approached the table, then paused. For all the stories people told about the Krillix conquerors, world breakers, the warriors who'd toppled empires, before humans had learned to smelt iron, there was hesitation in her posture now. Not fear of me, fear of what I might do. The armor is integrated with my neural interface, she said. You will need to work while I wear it. Not a problem, I lied, because I'd never repaired Krillix bioarmor in my life. I'd studied the schematics, read the cross-species medical warnings, and watched a training holo twice. But confidence, I'd learned, was half the battle in any repair. With machines, with people, with alien warriors who could snap you in half by accident. She climbed onto the table with a controlled grace that didn't fit her size. The deck shivered when she shifted her weight, but the table held mostly because I'd overbuilt it. Like any human who'd ever been told something couldn't be done, I rolled my diagnostic scanner closer. The screen filled with cascading data, thermal stress readings, molecular lattice distortions, biosynthetic fiber integrity levels. As the scanner swept over the torn chest plating, alarms popped up like angry little fireworks. Yeah, I muttered. That's worse than it looks. Celera's translator didn't bother with tone, but her eyes narrowed. Explain. The plasma lance didn't just cut, I said, zooming in on the readout. It melted through 3 composite layers. It stopped. I flicked a finger. The scan rendering a cross-section, millimeters from your actual chest. Your armor did its job. Barely. She didn't react, but her breathing deepened. Subtle and steady. Krillix didn't show pain easily. Or if they did, their culture had trained it out of them. The real problem wasn't the plating. It was the interface. The biosynthetic fibers were exposed and frayed. And those fibers weren't just wires. They were part of her. They carried sensation, feedback, the micro-adjustments that let her armor move like a second skin rather than a cage. One wrong splice, and I could leave her with permanent nerve damage. A proud warrior trapped in a body that didn't obey her. That, I suspected, was a fate she feared more than death. I reached for my micro-welder, then stopped and took a slow breath. My hands steadied. In the corner, a cooling fan whined. Somewhere in the ship, a bulkhead door thumped shut. The Valiant Dawn kept moving through space, indifferent to the fact that a human engineer was about to gamble with a Krillix commander's nervous system. This is going to take some time, I said, grabbing my neural fiber kit and setting it beside the table. And it might be uncomfortable. I have endured worse, human, Selara replied, as if she were reciting a line she'd said 1,000 times. Sure, I said, but I'd rather not add to your list. I started with the neural fibers. Each strand had to be realigned with the delicacy of sewing spider silk in a hurricane. The fibers twitched under my tools, responding to her nervous system, alive in a way most technology wasn't. I used microforceps and a stabilizing field emitter to keep them from snapping back, then applied biosynthetic gel my own mix. Because the standard ship med gel didn't bond correctly with Krillix tissue, the gel was an ugly, shimmering thing. In the vial, part human polymer, part Krillix armor compound, and a tiny measured dose of Navari regenerative catalyst that any sane species would have refused to combine on principle. Humans were not a sane species. As I worked, I felt Selara watching me, not the way an officer watched a subordinate, but the way someone watched a storm they couldn't predict, half wary, half fascinated. You work with great precision, she observed after a few minutes, her translator smoothing her rumble into something almost gentle. The other engineers said it could not be repaired. They stated I must wait 3 cycles for a replacement shipment from the Krillix homeworld. Yeah, I murmured, guiding a fiber into place. They were thinking inside the box. A box, she repeated, as if tasting the concept. Humans don't really do boxes, I said. We had to survive on a deaf world with predators, diseases, and natural disasters that would make most species file a formal complaint with the universe and give up. We didn't have the luxury of perfect plans. We had what worked. Death world. There was something almost eager in the way she said it. Curiosity, wrapped in warrior pride. I have read the reports about Earth. Class 12 hazard rating. How did your species survive? I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my mouth, even as I kept my eyes on the fibers. Stubbornness, I said, and the ability to look at broken things and see possibilities instead of problems. A faint shift in the air told me she'd leaned closer. The workshop lights caught the bioluminescent patterns on her skin, the lines pulsing softly in sync with her breathing. Noble lineage, they said, on the Krillix. Those patterns weren't just decoration, they were a living record of family, duty, and the neural interface that made their armor an extension of their will. The fibers finally settled, the gel bonding cleanly. The alarms on my scanner quieted, one by one. Neural interface is stabilizing, I said. More to myself than to her. Good. That's the part that keeps me up at night. You fear, Selara said, not accusing, observing. I respect. The consequences, I corrected, because fear wasn't a word I liked wearing. There's a difference. She was silent for a moment, then gave a slow nod that made the torn armor creak softly. Respect is understood. The plating was next. The plasma lance had crystallized sections of the molecular structure. The edges of the tear weren't just cut. They'd been changed brittle, stressed, ready to fracture further under impact. If I tried to weld it like standard metal, it would hold until the first real fight, then shatter like glass. I needed to reforge it, not in a furnace at the molecular level. I reached into my locked drawer and pulled out a small canister. No label, just a warning strip and my own handwriting in Sharpie. Do not use unless desperate. Selara's eyes tracked it. What is that? An experiment, I admitted. Human-designed nano-catalyst mixed with Krillix armor compound. In theory, it'll restructure damaged composite from the inside out. In practice, I turned the canister in my hand. It's never been tested on Krillix bioarmor. Her gaze didn't waver. You believe it will work? I think it will, I said honestly, but I need you to know there's risk. Heat, pain, potential feedback through your interface. Trust was sacred among the Krillix. They didn't hand it out like a casual salute. Cellara's translator clicked softly. I trust your judgment, Thompson. The words landed heavier than her footsteps. I'd worked under pressure before reactor leaks. Hull breaches, botched grav plating during a meteor storm, but this was different. This wasn't just a job. This was a warrior king, well, not king. But the Krillix didn't have an easy human equivalent placing her survival in my hands. Because her people's technology couldn't bend the way ours could. I opened the canister and drew the catalyst into a micro-injector. Under the lights, it looked like living mercury, silver, restless, almost eager. Okay, I said, more softly than I meant to. Here we go. I applied the catalyst along the fractured seam. It spread instantly, crawling into cracks and pores, threading itself through the damaged lattice like a river finding every low point. The armor began to glow, first a faint shimmer, then a brighter, heat-borne pulse. The scanner spiked. Temperature rising. Structural reconfiguration. Active. Molecular bonds shifting. Cellara's breath caught. Her muscles tensed beneath the armor, and for a heartbeat I thought she might shove me away on reflex. But she held still, jaw clenched, eyes fixed not on my face, but on my hands. Sorry, I said quickly, adjusting the cooling field and dampening the feedback loop. I know it's hot. Almost done. Her voice came out quieter, rougher. Continue. I did. My hands moved with practice-focused micro-welder guiding the seam. Cooling field balancing the heat. Scanner monitoring the neural feedback so I didn't accidentally spike her interface. The catalyst did its work in shimmering waves, rebuilding the molecular structure instead of simply patching it. And then something unexpected happened. The seam didn't just stabilize, it strengthened. The lattice lines on the scanner shifted into a new configuration, tighter bonds, cleaner alignment. The armor's glow changed, the pulsing bioluminescence, sensing with the repaired section as if it had always been part of her. The fibers beneath the plating lit up in a soft blue pulse that matched Cellara's neural patterns. Not forced, not artificial, integrated. That, I murmured, that's beautiful. Beauty is not the purpose of armor, Cellara said automatically, then hesitated, as if recognizing the rigidity of the statement. But I understand your meaning. I sealed the final seam and eased off the tools. The workshop fell into a sudden, almost startling quiet. My forearms ached. Sweat cooled on the back of my neck. The smell of heated composite hung in the air like a new layer of ozone. I stepped back and let my shoulders drop. Done, I said, voice hoarse. Armors repaired and upgraded. Cellara sat up slowly, testing her movement. The repaired chest plating flexed with her like a living thing, seamless and strong. She rotated her shoulders, then took a deep breath as if expecting pain that didn't come. I glanced at the scanner again to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Molecular restructuring took. I said, "Looks like it's about 30% more resistant to plasma weapons now. Give or take a few percent." She stood, and the table sighed in relief when her weight left it. Solara ran a massive hand over the area that had been torn open. Her fingers traced the seam, searching for weakness, for roughness, for any sign of damage. There was none. Her eyes widened not in fear, but in something that might have been wonder. The translator didn't have a word for that, so it stayed in her expression instead. Remarkable, she said. Then she turned to face me fully. For the first time since I'd known her, she made a Krillix version of a smile, small, sharp-edged. Not quite human, but unmistakably warm. The Krillix have been warriors for 10,000 years. She said, "We have conquered worlds and toppled empires. We have broken fleets that outnumbered us." I wiped my hands again, though they were already clean, because I didn't know what to do with the sudden weight of her attention. "Yeah, I've heard the stories, but I begin to understand," Solara continued. "Why the galaxy fears humanity, fears us." I arched an eyebrow. "We're not exactly the biggest species in the room." "You do not conquer through strength alone," she said. And there was no contempt in it, only a quiet certainty. "You adapt. You innovate. You see possibilities where we see only obstacles." She stepped closer and placed a hand on my shoulder. Even gentle, it was heavy. I could feel the strength in it, the kind of strength that came from a life spent carrying war like a familiar burden. But her touch was careful, controlled, as if she understood exactly how fragile humans were compared to her. "You fix what others call broken," Solara said. "That is a power far greater than any weapon." For a moment, the workshop felt different. Not smaller, not larger, just changed. Like the space between us had shifted, filled with something I hadn't expected to find between a human engineer and a Krillix commander. Then she withdrew her hand, gave a crisp nod, and turned toward the door. Her repaired armor gleamed as she left, the bioluminescent patterns pulsing steadily. The seam on her chest now stronger than the plating around it. Her footsteps faded down the corridor, each one a reminder that she'd go back to war, back to the bridge, back to the battles that would keep testing whether any armor, no matter how upgraded, was ever enough. I stood there for a long time after she was gone, surrounded by tools and spare parts and half-finished projects, breathing in ozone and burnt metal. Maybe that was what made humans different in a galaxy full of ancient empires and perfect protocols. We weren't the strongest. We weren't the oldest. We weren't even the most advanced. But we didn't stop when something broke. We didn't accept impossible as an answer. We rolled up our sleeves, got our hands dirty, and tried anyway, because on a death world, that was how you survived. And sometimes, out here among the stars, that stubborn refusal to quit made all the difference.